Okay, for those steady listeners, I do want to give you a little warning about this episode. It is a little longer than normal. I have a guest on the episode, and there were just too many good nuggets that were filtered in throughout all of it, or maybe laced in throughout all of it, and so I didn't want you to miss any of it. So instead of the typical shorter episode, it's a little bit longer, but give it a listen. I promise you won't be sorry. Welcome to Becoming Tantalum with me, Megan Bennell. Discover your brightest self in a journey of transformation and resilience. Let's embark on this path together, starting now. Hey there, fabulous listeners, and welcome back to Becoming Tantalum, the podcast where we get real, get a little raw, and back it up with some solid science. I'm Megan, your life coach, who's here to tell you like it is. So today, we're going to be talking about something that could totally flip your life upside down in a good way. We're diving into the difference between living your life focused on probability versus possibility. And buckle up because this is going to be one heck of a ride. I'm very excited about who we have joining us today. So let's kick this off with a little brain teaser. How many times have you thought to yourself, what are the chances? Maybe you've got a dream or a goal or something that you've been wanting to do, but you hold back because you're calculating the probability of success. Do you ask yourself, what if I fail? What if this doesn't work out? Does any of that sound familiar? Well, I'm here to tell you that living your life based on probability might just be holding you back from some serious magic. So let's talk real quick about the difference between probability and possibility. So probability is the likelihood that something will happen. This is based on the past, your past, everybody else's past. Individuals that are focusing on probability are looking to their past and anything they know about to determine their future, whereas possibility is what can be, what you're capable of, unlocking things that perhaps you've never done before. So individuals that focus on possibility are looking at what they can create in their future, not what they did or didn't create in their past. And I'd like to offer that your past is important because it made you who you are today. Solid. But it has nothing to do with your future. Every day moving forward is for you to create. You can grow and change and learn and rock the socks off your past because the future hasn't happened yet. Anything is possible, hence being possibility focused. Here's where the nerd in me gets a little bit excited. Studies in psychology and neuroscience have shown that our brains are wired to assess risk and predict outcomes. That's a survival mechanism. According to Dr. Tali Sharot, a cognitive neuroscientist, our brains have something that's called negativity bias. Now, we've talked about confirmation bias before, and this is a very similar concept. It means that we're more likely to focus on potential threats or failures than on opportunities for success. But here's the kicker. Focusing on probability is only going to limit your potential. Keep in mind that this risk assessment that your brain goes through is your primitive brain trying to keep you safe. It's always that primitive brain that's holding you back. We've talked about this before. And in this case, your primitive brain is looking at what was and assuming that's the same as what is going to be. And this couldn't be further from the truth. When you only consider what's likely, you're going to miss out on what's possible. And remember one of our favorite doctors, Dr. Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset. We talked about this a little bit before in a few episodes ago. Her research on growth mindset versus fixed mindset shows us that people who focus on possibilities and believe in their ability to grow and change are more likely to achieve extraordinary things. So here's where I'm getting most excited. I am honored to have someone in my life that lives with this possibility mindset. He has taught me to really focus on what's possible and not what is probable. And he's always recognized that your results are in your hands and that the power for your success is in your hands. And that confidence in his decision-making and action-taking is what has led him to taking incredible risks and the results blowing his own mind. So this dreamer and goal seeker is my husband. And it's one of the characteristics that I love and admire most about him. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to Dustin, my most amazing husband. Dustin, say hi.
Hello, everybody.
He's going to share a little bit about the risks that he's taken. And while he does, I'm going to play the part of the primitive brain. And so you'll see how his possibility-focused mind overcomes that risk assessment and allows him to head toward his goals with a fierce motivation. So Dustin, tell us a little bit about what you do and what that has afforded you in our life now.
So I'm a small business owner. I operate pawn shops. I have multiple locations in multiple cities in 2 different states. And where that all started was based off of a career that was going very well in corporate America, doing operations, transportation, all of that kind of stuff. And what I realized is that no matter how far I worked myself up that food chain, my time split between making more money and spending time was never going to change. So whether the pay was $100,000 or $150,000 or $250,000 or $500,000 as I climbed the corporate ladder, that was always going to be traded for, 50, 60 hours a week and probably more and more travel as that ladder continued to climb. And really what I was looking for was something that I could have balance. I wanted to be able to raise my kids, be with my family, be with my wife. And also,
I like that part.
Yeah, and also provide steady income for the family. And I always knew that I wanted to be on my own. And so about 6 years ago, a shift in my mind hit where I decided that it was time to stop trying to climb the corporate ladder and jump into business for myself, where I could control the amount of time I spent for the amount of money that I could make to still provide for my family.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there. So you were in a successful job.
Yep.
And you were moving up that ladder pretty quickly.
Yep.
And because of that, we were going to move to a super cool town and you're going to have a super cool job, but work all the time.
Correct. Super cool town is relative. I hate big cities, and we were going to be moving to Los Angeles, and I really enjoy visiting big cities, and I enjoy, taking a vacation and exploring big cities. But as far as daily life goes, I like having space to roam around, place for my kids to walk out the back door and have plenty of room to play in a community that's small and tight. Everybody's friendly. And so as far as a great place to go, I wouldn't necessarily call it that. Fair. Some people might, but I wouldn't.
Okay, fair. But at that time, you were even flying to work sometimes. That sounds pretty rad.
Yeah, because I had to be in LA a lot. I had a friend of mine that also lived local, but also worked in LA, and he had his own private plane. And so every once in a while, instead of doing that long commute into LA and sitting in traffic for hours and hours, we'd jump on his own little private airplane and land out in Inglewood, and I'd take the small trip to work that way.
Pretty cool. So something, though, that I do want to point out. So you were moving up the corporate ladder. You're doing really well, flying to work sometimes, had the opportunity to move to a super cool city. But how much were you around us?
Initially, when I started that job, before I got promoted a few times, it was pretty consistent. I just worked at, your average. When you're in operations and trying to work up the ladder, there's no average time. But 9 to 5, really, that was more like, 6 to 5 or 7 to 9, depending on the day, and some weekends and stuff, just to be able to get the job done. But average time a day, gone just like most parents that are working a full-time job, Monday through Friday, occasional weekend work. But outside of that, I was gone 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, just depending on the day.
And how much flexibility was there in that?
Oh, yeah. I just like everybody else had my 2 weeks of vacation, and I had the 3 days of sick time that California mandated at the time. And so outside of that, I was at work.
And you made decent money, but compared to what you make now, compared to flexibility now, compared to be creating your own schedule now, what does that look like?
With any small business ownership, don't kid yourself. There's going to be ebbs and flows where, during COVID, we lost pretty much half of our team, and I was working my butt off and driving to LA anyways, because that's where one of my stores is. And so it definitely goes with ebbs and flows. But at the end of the day, I still got to call the shots. I got to decide what days am I going to work versus my team working, even though I was putting in a lot more hours. But on an average basis now, the income is far better. The amount of flexibility I have is pretty much 100%. Outside of a couple things that I do with my team, on an annual basis, and once a month there's a trip to LA I have to take. But outside of that, I get to decide when and where I want to be. I still work really hard and I still put in lots of hours, but a lot of times those hours now are at night when my kids are sleeping so that I can still coach their teams. Those hours are sometimes early in the morning, and the travel is definitely far less. I was at one point going back and forth to the East Coast, making trips, even abroad to handle supplier relationships. At this point, it's now completely on my own schedule, and I don't have to be anywhere unless I decide that's where I want to be, and I need to be there when I'm going to be there.
I love it. So as a coach, a lot of what I do is start with what you are wanting and then helping you build the bridge and gain the skills to get there. Would you say that this is where you want to be, or is there a future ahead of you that you're looking forward to?
I'm one of those people that has a mindset that there's always a future I want to be at. I don't think there's ever a time that I'm going to feel like, all right, I've landed the plane, I'm good, this is where I'm going to stop. But from where I was to where I am, what I saw myself at the time and what I was hoping for, I've absolutely arrived. Again, now that I've arrived here, there's a new frontier that I'd love to go attack and then new opportunities that I'd love to go after. But from when I left the corporate job, knew what I was going to have to do, the work I was going to have to put in to get to where I am today, I would say that this is where I saw the plane landing and what I was hoping for. And I accomplished that in, I'd say, for 2 years now. We've kind of been in this boat where I'm pretty comfortable, pretty free in my schedule.
So worth it.
Totally worth it.
Totally worth it. Okay, so here is where it gets a little bit spicy. Okay, so I'm that primitive brain again, screaming that he took this massive risk, which he's going to tell you all about that right now. So I want you, Dustin, to tell us how you got here. So you explained that you wanted to make that decision, but what is it? What was that first risky move that had so many people glaring at us and thinking it was a terrible move? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think the first risky move is actually something different than what you're talking about.
Ooh.
I think so my career was in operations. I started with Target distribution, went to Amazon distribution. And I think this was the first risky move. My dad was the fourth employee at his company. He's been there for over 30 years now. And I always kind of liked that idea of being a smaller fish in a bigger pond, whether that was going to be on my own one day or whether that was with a corporation. I knew that I wanted that level of influence. And so when I left Amazon, I went to a small startup company called The Honest Company, where I knew that the amount of work would be higher, the struggle would be greater, the infrastructure would be less, but the potential rewards would be great. And I did it for not a pay increase. In fact, I think I took a pay cut. I definitely took a pay cut in stocks. It wasn't anything drastic. It was probably pretty close to even, but I knew that I wanted to trade what the success ladder could potentially be like in a much more rapid time frame and the level of influence I had on what was actually happening versus, being a tiny fish in a massive pond when I was working at Amazon. So I think the first big move was actually going from Amazon to The Honest Company. And then when I had promoted up the ranks in The Honest Company and gotten to a point where I was going to need to move out to Santa Monica, that's when, we started making the career move. We decided we were going to move to Los Angeles. We sold our house. Megan had quit her job.
Quit my job.
We had 2 kids at the time, and I was sitting there Christmas night. Now that's the 25th, mind you. Our house was closing on the 27th.
2 days.
And I sleep like a baby. I don't have trouble sleeping ever, mind you, maybe 2 times a year where something hits my brain where I can't get it off.
That's fact.
This was one of those nights, and I was sitting there thinking, just what are we doing? This is just another stopping ground. We're putting our life on hold. It's not where we want to be. Yes, it's a great opportunity. Yes, the money's good. I like the company I work for. I didn't even mind being there. Really enjoyed working there. But it just seemed like I was just putting another holding pattern in what we wanted our life to look like for a very short period of time when that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I stayed up all night crunching numbers, figuring out how much money we had, what opportunities were potentially out there. And I had a friend that was in the pawn industry, and he and I had joked around for years about going into business together, but never even a serious conversation, had never even thought about leaving what I was doing. And pretty much overnight, I crunched all the math and made sure that it was something I thought was feasible. And I called him the next morning, asked him if he wanted to have a serious conversation about it. He was open to it. And within, 2 weeks, basically I'd never even stepped foot in a pawn shop before I was considering buying one. So I wanted to get a little bit of work under my belt and see if it was something I was into. So went and worked at a shop one day a week just to check it out. At that point, kind of made the decision, took a lot of partners on it and asked for people's, I don't know, their opinions on the idea. And really within, I think, 2 weeks, we had probably made the decision. It was a little bit longer than that before we actually made the switch, but made the decision. Megan was begging for a job back. We were...
Because I quit.
Our house was sold. And so we were begging the people we sold it to let us rent it back from them. We canceled all our plans to move to LA. I took a massive pay cut. I don't mean to throw numbers out there for any purpose of bragging, but other than just to show the risk that was aligned with it. I was making about $180,000. I was 27 years old. I dropped
$36,000 is what he made. $36,000
is
that was the salary.
The salary. So basically, I just looked at my finances and said, "This is what I need to survive," and figured out what that number was because I needed to take as small of an income as possible to put in as much work as possible to make sure that the business I was getting into was a success. And so, if I took a big salary, then it would take a lot longer for that business to be successful. So that was part of the deal. And I took a 6-figure pay cut. And within, a total of 6 weeks, I think, from the time I thought about the idea, I had quit my job and moved into owning a pawn shop.
Yeah. So risk. We were going to be homeless. I had no place to go. I didn't have a job. Now needed a full-time job. I went from a part-time job to a full-time job. He was taking a very massive pay cut that I could not make up with my full-time job. Yeah, it was a lot. And we had no idea how this all was going to go. So that was the big risk. You can see why we got lots of glares over that one because that seems a little bit crazy. So chances are, Dustin, this wasn't going to work. And let me explain that. I know your brain doesn't work that way, but mine does. So you took that pay cut. Your wife, that's me, had just quit her job to stay home with her kids and had to go beg for a full-time job back at her work. We were homeless in a matter of a couple of weeks when you made this decision. All that information together showed that this was a terrible idea. And then there was even more evidence that this was a horrible idea. So I actually ran some numbers. You guys know me. I'm a big number person, a big science person. So I looked up the numbers of how probable it is for a business to fail. And this wasn't exactly a startup because Clint was bringing you into one of the shops, but you were joining a business that was up and running, but it still was a self-owned business. And the chances of a self-owned business failing is above 70%. Above 70%. That's some solid evidence right there, I think, that you were probably going to fail. But along with all those specific circumstances in our life and that number, we were against all odds, obviously. Was your primitive brain screaming at you, this is a terrible idea?
To be honest, I think my brain was screaming at me it was a terrible idea to not. And I know that is different than the way most people operate.
Almost
and
everybody.
Most people think. Definitely I was scared. You don't want to let your family down. You don't want to end up in a position where you failed and have to eat that failure pie.
Go through your mind that you might fail and let your family down?
Yeah, it absolutely went through my mind. I think I just had enough experience prior to that to know that what I was capable of and the amount of work I was willing to do to make something work. And so it wasn't a massive fear of mine like it probably should have been. But through my work with, my corporate career, especially with the Honest Company, I kept on getting thrown new curveballs and new challenges and new opportunities. And every single time, my mind is why me? And I'm not ready for this. I went from a operations manager to a site leader to a general manager to director of operations, running pretty much everything East Coast, West Coast, and some things outside of that. And yeah, every time I was like, I don't know why they're selecting me for this. And I'm not sure this is something I can handle. But every time I did. And so every time it was a little bit more work. I had to go learn some new things. I had to meet new people and make new relationships. But at the end of the day, every single time it panned out, and it continued to pan out. And I had taken that experience, I think, and probably trained myself a little bit that I was capable of a lot, and that this risk that I was taking, because I didn't really feel that way, was that it's on my shoulders, and I'm pretty confident in what I've done so far, and I think I can translate my experiences thus far and take them into a new arena and execute the same way. And so, yes, it was scary. Yes, it seemed on paper that this is a bad idea, But I had already trained myself in that I can continue to do more. I've not hit my ceiling. My ceiling is up here. In fact, I don't know where my ceiling is, and I'm just going to keep pushing myself until I find my ceiling. I think a lot of people, they operate with, I'm at the top, I've arrived, I'm here, I can't do more. But really, if you continue to learn and you continue to have an open mind and you continue to be willing to put in the work, I knew that it was something that was possible. I was also fortunate in that with the career that I had had, it was a pretty good backfall. And so I knew that if it did fail, that I potentially couldn't go right back out into the workplace and make exactly how much I was making before, but I had made enough connections, made enough solid relationships, had enough people that believed in me that if it did fail, I could pretty quickly go back into my old world and be successful again. So,
but you were banking on your capability.
100%. Yeah, this wasn't. 100% banking on my capability. I didn't really have anybody else's hands to put it in. So yeah.
And that really is the difference between probability and possibility, is what are you capable of and what's possible for you. That's a big piece. But it's funny that you say that, Dustin, because I'm going to push back one more time on you. You've actually tried this already.
Yeah.
And you started a business
Yep.
that never got off the ground. And I would think that would be evidence that this is a bad idea, that this big risk was not going to pan out. You even have proof, in fact, that you will fail in owning your own business. So tell us about that and how you move past that.
Yeah. So when I was in college, I had this crazy idea. It was when Tom's Shoes was fairly new, and they were doing the 1-for-1 idea. For whatever reason, decided that having a condom business would be a really good business.
Sounds like a college idea.
Yeah. And so I put a little bit of work and research into it and figured I could have really solid profit margins selling condoms at a 1-for-1 rate, the same way Tom's Shoes did, with a philanthropic angle to it, where for every condom we sold, we donated one to sub-Saharan Africa, the most affected region in the world by AIDS and HIV. And so, I thought that was a really good idea. And then, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know which way you should put it, but my professor at the time also thought it was a really good idea and believed in me. And so we had a school project where an entire course is just integrating yourself into a small business and basically working for that small business to understand what it's like to actually run a business. I was the first one where she actually gave me a team of students to go and try to make my own business successful rather than going and integrating into a small business. So she believed in me, and I was like, all right, if she believes in me, then this is maybe actually something I can do. So I had a team of 4 working for me, just fellow classmates, and we did it. We got it done. We were able to line up a supplier in Malaysia. We had condoms on order. Brand was done. I had another student that I was, paying probably $25 or something to help me with marketing because she needed credits. We started a condom company, and all of a sudden I was sitting in my house with 100,000 condoms in
That's
boxes.
many boxes in our house.
Yeah,
Many.
Lots of condoms. And started the process, built a website, started selling, and then the big bad wolf government came in and said I didn't have all the proper licensing to operate a medical device, which I was like, okay, that sucks. So we put on hold, went out and got our medical device licenses, which was another process, another thing that I had to learn. And what ended up happening was that the medical devices we got were not the correct ones, and we didn't do it in the correct time frame. So the FDA essentially said that we need to either ship our entire supply back to Malaysia and have it re-enter customs the proper way, or we could have it destroyed by an FDA facilitator. And so we had borrowed money from my parents to make this thing happen. It was like $10,000 startup, not a ton now, but seemed like a lot then. I decided at the end of the day I was working another career, had married my beautiful wife, and that the effort that it was going to take and the financial investment it was going to take to do it was probably not worth what we were going to be able to do with it. And so, we kind of wrapped it up at that point and didn't continue forward. It was an absolute failure based off of misinformation, not learning enough. Honestly, probably not working hard enough. I probably didn't put enough hours into it that I should have if I wanted to make it a success. But it was a huge learning experience. And so even though I failed at it, I look back at it, and if I tried it all over again with what I know today, I could probably make that a success. It's not really where I want to put my money and time, but I basically took that, learned from it. I also learned pretty quick in a lot of the places I worked, especially, gaining promotions and gaining trust, is that you fail fast. If you're going to take risk, make sure it's calculated. You don't want to gamble. It's not going and taking your life savings and putting it all on black and seeing what happens. You want to take calculated risk, but risk is important. And that if you're going to fail, once you know it's going down, make it go down fast, because the quicker you fail and learn from that failure and move on to the next thing, the sooner the new opportunity that has potentially big rewards is pretty big. And you can look at that in any type of arena. You look at a basketball player who's, not hitting enough jumpers. They're going to go work on their jumpers like crazy. They might figure out that they're not a jump shooter. They're going to be the 3-point line guy. So they double down on 3-pointers and they make it to the NBA. You got a golfer that's in a rut and isn't, making cuts. And so all of a sudden he's changing his swing up and realizes this swing ain't working for him either. Shut it down and start new again. And it's about that failing fast, quick recovery, and make sure you're always trying to move on to the next thing so that you don't let that failure be what defines you.
I was just going to say that because we actually talked about this a couple episodes ago about how failure is really just part of the process and that you learn from it and move on, but you don't let it define you. So I love that you said that. All right. So as I said before, this is one of the things that I love and admire most about you is your ability to look at possibility and not focus on probability. And you have that ability to turn off that primitive screaming brain that so many of us listen to because it's just fear. It's trying to keep us safe. And you use your logical brain, which is a little slower in processing things. And it's not yours is slow, just everybody's logical brain. I didn't want him to think I was calling him slow, but,
She's right.
but it takes a little bit longer, and it's an intentional focus on possibility instead of probability. And that's how you make your decisions. So can you walk us through just kind of briefly any decisions, what that looks like for you? How is it that you shut down that probability focus and really do allow yourself to focus on possibility?
It's a good question. I'm also slightly distracted because I realized I'm wearing the same color as the chair and I look like a floating head and arms right now. But, how do I shut down that possibility focus and get to probable?
Other way. Probability focus.
Probability focus and get to possible. Yeah, I think that my general curiosity and my continuous thirst for wanting to know and understand more probably just makes me skip that process. Because instead of focusing on what is probably going to happen, I'm focused on how can I do this? And so I'm, doing research and I'm weighing the pros and cons and I'm looking at, what does my backfall look like? I'm asking people for advice. You feel like you're at a place in life where coaching isn't necessary anymore. But the reality is that if you have a mentor, you have a coach. If you have people you go to for advice, you have a coach. To some degree, anybody of any level of success, they have coaches, whether they call them a coach or not, they're still a coach. And so talking through what success looks like rather than what probable failures there are, I think I kind of just skip over the whole idea of what probable failures there are because I'm so focused on what does success look like and what do I need to have, know, or do to succeed that it's not a focus of mine. So I don't think I really dwell on it or even think about it much because I'm too focused on how am I going to make this work, or is this something I can make work that doesn't really cross my mind.
So you just said something that actually sparked a important point, and I happen to know, but obviously they don't know. When he took this big risk, in fact, all of the big risks, everybody in our life that's close to us was chirping that this is not a good idea because it wasn't safe because they were risks. So you talk about going to talk to people, get advice from people, and I happen to know those aren't the people in our life, except maybe one or two. So how do you decide when you're going out to seek advice or seek opinions or what, who is it, not specifically, but the kind of person, because it's not the people that are surrounding us. Who is it that you go talk to?
That's another good question. I think for me, it's got to be a plethora of different angles. It can't be, it's like, you have this idea that you already know, that you think you know. And so when you do a Google search to see if you're right, you're putting in keywords that are going to just validate that what you think you already know, when the reality is there's a whole nother side to every story. So it's important to get multiple points of view. I always go to my parents, just because they were a really good foothold for me growing up. They have very sound wisdom, is probably the best word I would use for it, but they're not risk takers. They're more on the, let's play the safe side of things. And so I know I can go to them and understand that something might not be safe, but it's not in their demeanor to go that route anyways. But at least they're going to talk me through some things I probably didn't think of from a family angle or from a lifestyle angle, that I wouldn't have considered. And then for what I want to, the people I go to outside of that is really what people that have had success in this type of success that I'm looking for, living the type of life that I'm hoping to live. You go and you talk to those people, and regardless of if you know them well or not, most people are pretty open to share. Going to those people would at least lay the foundation of me understanding how much work is this going to take? What am I going to need to know to start a business that I probably don't know? What does it look like when I've had success? Am I really going to get into something that is going to allow me to have the flexibility and lifestyle I want? Or is it just going to work for myself and be even more stressed out because now the buck stops with me and I'm putting in just as much work as I do in the corporate world? So really it's going to those people that have had the success that you're looking for or live the life that you're hoping to live and asking them and really understanding what is it going to take for me to get there. Because the reality is I don't know the actual percentages, but it feels like probably 95% of the world lives in a safe space. They work for somebody else where as long as they do their job sufficient, that they're going to continue to collect a paycheck. They're going to continue to understand exactly the hours they're going to need to put in. They're going to live their life relatively risk-free and also have the same type of rewards that come with little risk. There's not going to be a ton of flexibility. They're not going to have that type of lifestyle that I was looking for. And so those people are probably not the right people to talk to, even though that's probably the majority of the people you know.
So you had to seek them out.
100%. Yeah. So my current business partner was one of them. We talked a ton about it and what does success look like for him? What is his lifestyle like now? What did it take to get there? What am I going to bring to the table when I get there? What's expected of me when I join the organization? He and I had lots of conversations, but it was other small business owners that I know, people that operate their own real estate companies, people that, some guys that went really far in sports. What did it take for them to get far in sports? All that different type of stuff that, included sacrifice with reward, because if you just are talking about the sacrifice or the risk, you're going to talk yourself out of it 100% of the time. You have to understand the potential reward, and you also have to understand the workload you're getting yourself into and what it's going to take.
I love it. I love it. Well, this episode obviously was focused on choosing intentionally to be possibility focused instead of probability focused. And so if you could narrow down to just like one or two quick tips or things they could take away that could help make that shift. I know it's not difficult for you, but at some point it was, because we're all raised that way. But what allowed you to focus on what's possible instead of what's probable? Maybe give them one or two things.
Be genuinely curious, because if you're not, you won't go far. You have to be willing to take the time to understand what risk you're taking. But the reality is nobody's ceiling is where they think they are. In fact, pretty much everybody's ceiling it might not be existent. Most ceilings are put on by the amount of work you're willing to do or the level of comfort and lifestyle you're willing to live, not by what you're actually capable of. So you need to balance that out, in that your ceiling is nowhere near where you're at, and that your ceiling is probably endless, but you just need to balance out what does that look like as far as the amount of work you're willing to do and the type of lifestyle you want to live, because that will really be the indicator of where your ceiling lies. And then on top of that, you need to stop worrying about what could happen, what could go wrong. And if you take all of that time you spend on looking at what is probably going to go wrong, and instead shift it into your research and your constant rumination of thought and the people you talk to about what am I going to do to need to make this success. And again, I'm talking mostly business, but you could apply this to anything. Then if you shift that, the way you spend that time, it's really very, very little time focused on what is probably going to go wrong, and a ton more time focused on what can I possibly achieve. And if once you understand the ins and outs based off of figuring out what can you possibly achieve and what does success look like, it's really easy to make those decisions that most people would call risky. There are decisions that if you don't go through that process, you're more gambling than you are taking risk. And there's a big difference between gambling and taking risk. So yeah, I would say stop focusing on what probably will happen based off of other people's results, because other people aren't you, and focus a lot more on what is possibly going to happen, what the possible outcomes are, and what you're possibly going to learn in it. Even if you fail, if you focus on what you learn and how to take that and fix it for the next time, you still didn't fail. You just learned a way of not doing it, and you can do it all over again in a much better way. So it's really probably the amount of time you take focusing take it off of what is probably going to go wrong and put it on what is possible. Probably be okay.
So 3 big things. Be real curious.
Yep.
And ignore your ceiling that you think you have because it's fictitious.
Yep.
And shift your energy from trying to prove what's probable to what actually could be possible.
Yep.
All right.
And I'd say the last thing is, I don't know if this is PG or PG-13, but be willing and ready to work your ass off. If you're not willing and ready to work your ass off, or at a place where you can work your ass off, it's probably not the time for it. And there's going to be ebbs and flows in life where you have that ability and don't, but timing can be a lot of it too. So understand that, you get to see the pretty side of people that have success, but you don't get to watch Kobe Bryant sitting in the gym for 3 hours every morning shooting jumpers. They never advertise that, right? Even all the way into his late 30s as a pro, arguably the best, one of the highest paid athletes in the world, he is still spending 3 hours a day. I think it's something like 1,400 jumpers that he makes before he's done. Understand that it's going to take work, and be willing to work your ass off.
But I think that's part of the being curious and really understanding what it takes to get there, and then being honest. Am I willing to do what it takes to get
Absolutely.
there? And
Yep.
that's where, are you capable and are you willing?
Mm-hmm.
Both of those things. Awesome. Well, I love my quotes. So here's a quote from Norman Vincent Peale. He said, "Shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you'll land among the stars." So even if you aim for something big and you fail, you're still going to be better off than you were before, because you might not hit that exact target, but you'll achieve things that you never thought were possible. So I wanted to give you some actionable steps as well. So how do you start living a life focused on possibility rather than probability? I'll give you a few. 1, reframe your thoughts. We talk about this a lot, but when you catch yourself thinking about the probability of failure, reframe it instead and ask yourself, but what if it works out? Focus on that best case scenario, and then get all the information you need for what that would look like. The second is visualize success. So spend a few minutes each day visualizing your goals and your dreams as if they were real. And that can help you turn your brain to the focus of the positive outcomes instead of those potential negative outcomes. And then take small steps. We've talked about this before too. You got to break it up. Don't let that fear of failure paralyze you, but break your goals into smaller, manageable steps, actionable items, and then celebrate your success of each one along the way. We didn't get to where he is now in a day. And so there were a lot of small steps along the way, all of which were totally doable. The goal as a whole might not seem doable at the beginning, but just break it up. I want to get scientific a little bit more, just a tiny bit. According to research that was published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, individuals that are willing to adopt that possibility mindset are much more resilient and adaptable, which you know is going to help you in all areas of your life, not just on this specific goal that you're talking about. They're better at problem solving, and they're much more likely to take risks that lead to significant rewards. Because remember, a lot of times that ceiling you're putting on yourself, you're also putting a ceiling on your rewards. So that mindset shift will allow you to go from a state of fear and caution to one of creativity or curiosity and exploration. So if you want an action item, some of you guys love those. Here's one. You can start a journal of possibility or a possibility journal. So every day, write down one thing that you want to achieve. Could be big, could be little, and explore those possibilities. So instead of focusing on what if I fail, instead ask yourself, what if it works out? And how would this change my life? What would those results look like? What would success look like? And that practice will help to train your brain to focus on those possibilities rather than on the limitations. And it really can be anything. It can be that you want to stop a bad habit, that you want to start a good habit. It could be a change of career. It could be a change in parenting. It can be anything. But start a possibility journal. That'll help you in making that mind shift. But all in all, is there anything else that you want to say to our fabulous listeners, Dustin?
No, it's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. As I was planning out this podcast, I was like, I know the right guy, because this is definitely something he is good at. So for all of you out there, remember that living your life based on probability is going to keep you stuck in the realm of the likely. But when you shift your focus to possibility, you're going to open yourself up to a world of potential. And I'd even like to say magic. So don't let fear and doubt keep you from achieving your goals and your dreams. Embrace those possibilities, and you're going to be able to watch your life transform. Thank you for tuning in to Becoming Tantalum. And if you found this episode helpful, then please share it with somebody that you think might need a little push to start a life living in possibility. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review so that you never miss an episode. And until next time, keep dreaming big and believing in the magic of possibilities. That's all in your hands. You've got this. Bye. Thank you for joining me today. If you want to take all of these concepts and tools to a deeper level, apply them to your life, and watch the transformation happen, I would love for you to join the Tantalum Tribe. That's a monthly membership where all of our community has access to live coaching, self-paced courses, guest coaches, podcast study guides, anonymous question boards, and more. You too can transform your life using the tools and strategies that we have with accountability built in from our community. I really hope that you join us at tantalumcoaching.com. That's TANTALUM coaching.com. Just click join the tribe. I can't wait to see you in there.
An Ironic Media production. Visit us at ironickmedia.com.